How's it going, everybody? Been a while, but I am back with episode 11 now, finally, of Sabres Chat, presented by Built in Buffalo. I am your host, Luka, if you may have forgotten. Um, the season has ended. The dust is settled. When it comes to the Sabres, of course, we have playoff hockey going on right now as I'm recording this. I'm recording this earlier than I usually do, but that is due to getting some final preparations done that I need to do tonight, as I will be actually enjoying a bachelor weekend out in San Diego myself coming up here. But I wanted to make sure I get this episode out. We get back on track here because I think it's a great time now, especially with a lot of my other content, Bills Chat Live, all of the different stuff that I do with my colleague Josh at Bills Chat Pod. You can find him there. But we just wrapped up NFL draft season. It was a lot, and that would be mainly why I wasn't doing the past couple weeks with an episode. Just had a lot going on there, but that is wrapped up. We're now kind of getting into the lull period of the NFL offseason with the months of May and June not having a whole heck of a lot going on. The NHL, on the other hand, is right in the middle of the playoffs, of course. The Sabres are not in it, and this seems like a great opportunity to have this episode to come back. And what I plan on doing tonight really is just kind of, we've heard discussions elsewhere. And honestly, I've been kind of absorbing a lot of others individuals, just kind of feeling out takes that we've heard from respected individuals around the hockey world, as well as, of course, digest all of the things that we heard from the Sabres themselves a few weeks ago now during the locker room clean out. And then, of course, the postseason uh, press conferences from Granado, Kevin Adams, and so on and so forth. So it gave all of us fans a great idea and picture if you really read into it and just kind of read between the lines a little bit. I mean, I will say this. I respect Kevin Adams and Granado a lot. I feel like they were pretty upfront with a lot of different things. Not everything, of course, not trying to just divulge every offseason plan that they have coming up here, which I will say is probably going to be a little bit more active comparatively to the past few seasons. But overall, they at least gave everyone a little bit of a peek behind the curtain and just at least make everyone understand where their head is at. And I think there's a couple different things that I pulled from a lot of that information that kind of has led me to this episode here, where I really just want to talk about the roster. And I'm talking about the roster in the sense of kind of where everyone stands, that is still under contract for the most part. Of course, I will talk about Okposo and Gergensons, who are not currently under contract with the Sabres. They are free agents, but if there is a situation with them, naturally, that comes up. Will they be back? What would it take? So on and so forth. But overall, just who is a lock, who is most likely and very likely to still be here come opening night next season for the 23-24 NHL regular season. And then honestly, whose status is up in the air. And I think there's going to be at least one name in there that people are going to be surprised about that I bring up. And I just genuinely believe that it doesn't necessarily mean that he won't be here. But I do think that some may feel he's more of a lock than he actually may be. And there might be value in the roster spot he holds on top of also just what he could maybe return for this team when it comes to assets that inevitably I believe they're now going to be shifting that focus into, the goal and expectation being playoffs and then so on and so forth, and continue to build this momentum that was last season, getting it all the way to that final week before they were inevitably not able to make the postseason. So tonight, or if you're listening to this on Thursday afternoon, first and foremost, I greatly appreciate you listening bright and early when this actually comes out. But whenever you may be listening to this, the purpose of this episode tonight, or at this point in time, God, I keep saying tonight, even if you're not listening to it tonight, I do apologize. The purpose is going to be really just breaking down this roster. And I kind of brought up those terminologies on purpose. There are going to be locks, and I will go over their details quick. Kind of, it's good information to absorb just to understand where this roster is kind of breaking down. So you're going to have your locks. You're very likely still here come opening night. I don't necessarily think that they're locks, but also at the same time, I would be a little surprised to not see them on the roster, I guess, at this point in time. It'd be shocking to me. And there might be a name or two in there that is surprising that is not even a lock to begin with. But I will, of course, go into detail with that. Those are probably going to be the individuals I have a little bit more of a conversation about on why I believe them to be in that category. And then you have up in the air. Up in the air truly means, I don't really expect them, or at least they're like a 50-50 or balancing that 50-50 point on if they're on this roster come opening night. Now, that can mean a couple different things there, but overall, that is the third section. And then there's the kind of asterisk section that is for Okposo and Gergensen specifically, because I think it'd be nice to have a little bit of conversation about those two individuals. They deserve it. So, first and foremost, let's start this episode with the locks of the roster come next season. These are guys that are absolutely going to still be there 1000%. There is 0 point, like the world you would have to live in to not see these guys on the opening day roster is due to severe tragedy, because it's not because of just business of the NHL. It would be because of unforeseen things that, of course, no one in their life would ever want to wish upon anyone. So they are going to be on this roster. They will be a Buffalo Sabre probably for the foreseeable future throughout the contracts that they are on, I would imagine. So first and foremost, the forwards are Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch, Jeff Skinner, Dylan Cousins. Tage Thompson is going to be starting that 7, and Dylan Cousins as well, but Tage's contract next year kicks in, that extension that we saw last season. It is 7 years, 49.9 continuous million. It's a cap hit of $7.15 million or 7.14 and change. I'm just rounding up there. He's obviously our franchise. He's our juggernaut. He's everything. One of our franchise, I should say. He's everything. Dylan Cousins is in the similar boat. He is going to also be starting his 7-year contract at $49.7 million. That is a $7.1 million dollar hit to this roster. Jeff Skinner still has 4 years left at $9 million. And then Alex Tuch, honestly, is kind of the key to everything when it comes to being able to manage stuff, especially with a guy like Skinner, where he's still been great, but $9 million is a lot for someone that gives you his production at times. But Tuck still has 3 years at $4.75 million, which is honestly, that might be one of the biggest bargains in the NHL. He is a top forward, of course, in this league. He is unbelievably important to the Sabres. When he was gone for those couple weeks for the Sabres, it was extremely noticeable. He is everything to this team. He is, of course, a lock, and that is a hell of a deal to have him on. It's not his fault or anything like that. At the time, it was, I believe, a 7-year deal that he signed with Vegas, I want to believe. I don't know if that was Minnesota or Vegas, so don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was Vegas when the extension happened. And it could have been Minnesota. Regardless, he took the money at the moment in time, which, good on him. Always take the money if you can. He's going to probably be able to work his way into another great contract once that one gets to the end. Like I said, 3 years left at 4.75 mil. Those are your 4 locks at forward. There is probably a notable omission or two to people listening to this that I will get into later, but overall, locks mean there is no world that you can live in where these guys aren't on the opening day roster. So therefore, those are the 4 forwards that I have as absolute locks. Defensemen, I have 3 guys. These shouldn't be surprising at all. You have Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, who again, similar to like Cousins and Tage, have a similar contract situation, although it's different than them from that point on. And then Matthias Samuelsson, real quick. Samuelsson is very similar to Cousins and Tage in the sense of he is also starting his 7-year, but only $30 million contract, which is a $4.285 million hit. To me, he's worth the money. Hopefully he can stay healthy this year. But overall, I feel like that contract's going to look more and more like a bargain just because of the physicality and just what he brings to this defensive unit. He is very, very valuable, especially when he gets big minutes. I believe where he deserves to be, right next to Dahlin. Dahlin and Power now. They're absolute locks, of course. They are not going anywhere, everything like that. But they are both coming up on the last season of their respective contracts. Owen Power is his entry contract at $1.85 million upcoming. I would imagine he's going to be extended this offseason with how progressive and how forward thinking Kevin Adams is. I just don't necessarily know what that will entail. And I will get into that with Darlene. I don't believe it to be necessarily something that will be like these 7-year contract extensions that we have been seeing. I could maybe see a world just to help control everything and then also give Owen Power the ability to grow into one of these mass contracts that maybe we see something similar to what Darlene signed just a few years ago, where it's like a 3 for 18 at $6 million per year. That would make sense to me, I think, for both parties. It gives the Sabres a couple more years of kind of flexibility with the cap and everything like that. And then, you know, Power still gets a noticeable spike, while then also he'll be at that point, I believe he is going to be going into his 20, so 20, 21, 22. He'd be like 23 years old by the time that next contract comes up. So still plenty of time to cash in big for him. We'll be keeping a close eye on that, like all of you, of course. But overall, I think he is most likely to be extended. So even though he's going into the last season of his entry level contract, 1.85 million, I would imagine extension will come even before the season starts. Rasmus Dahlin is going into the last season of that $6 million contract that I mentioned. You're absolutely extending him. He has become a Norris finalist, I believe. At some point in time, it will be announced. I think he deserves that at least. Incredible season, incredible year, and I think he's still got room to grow. He's going to be looking to cash in, and you are going to happily want to pay him because he's only going to get more expensive with years to come. If you, and you definitely don't want him to hit the free agency market, of course, after this season. Not that I think that they would even remotely let that happen, but you're probably going to be paying him a 7-year, $75 million contract. It's going to be a massive contract. He's going to be the most expensive saver, I would presume. And I bet you Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, Jeff Skinners, all of those guys are going to be happy to see not at the top anymore and see Darlene up there because he absolutely deserves it. I look forward to when that is announced. I think it's very deserved, and Darlene should get every penny that is thrown his way. Those are the 3 defensemen. I already went over those 4 forwards. Last but not least is the goalies. I think there's only one lock for goalie, and it's the obvious one, of course, Devin Levi, who he did technically use one of his 3 years in the entry deal this past season, even though it was only a few games after coming in from college. That does use a year. That's why it was very smart to play him as much as you could, because why not? You're already paying him and you're burning one of those 3 years. You got to do that. He's going to be then going into the second year of his 3-year, $4.7 million entry level contract. He's a no-brainer. He's probably going to be your starter going into the season. How they handle the goaltender room with him will be interesting. We will go into that further when it comes to what's on the roster right now and what it sounded like with Kevin Adams and everything. So just real quick, the locks that I have listed here based on all the things that I believe and have heard and whatnot are Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, Jeff Skinner, Dylan Cousins, and then Darlene, Power, and Samuelson, and Levi to wrap it up between the pipes. Those are, to me, the only for sure locks. Where we're going to get into it now is the very likely to still be here, but I do live in a world that understands the NHL is a business. So I don't believe them to be locks, because if someone comes a knocking with a great offer that could drastically improve this roster, which I believe Kevin Adams will be very open to trying to see what he can do to do such a thing, they could potentially be used as something to improve this roster. So just like the locks, we're going to start with forwards here. The forwards, this is not the order I had them listed, but I will get to the fun part at the end here. First and foremost, Jordan Greenway. I believe him to basically be a lock. He's very likely still to be here because maybe something happens where an offer is just too good and he's kind of the final piece. But overall, you traded for him at the deadline. You didn't get a whole heck of a lot of him because he did suffer a minor injury, even just a few games after coming into the organization after that trade deadline. And then he actually kind of hit the ground running a little bit better there after coming back from the injury. But you spent an asset of some capacity to get him at the deadline. You want to see what he does after a full offseason, and actually here's the message out on what your grand scheme is for him. He's also going into the second year of a 3 for $9 million contract. Just overall, it just doesn't feel like a guy that you would move in the offseason. You want to try to develop him with what you had in mind when trading for him late last season. So I view him as a lock. I would say the likelihood of, and I'm going to do this for everyone, the likelihood of him being on the opening day roster to me is a 9 out of 10. I just don't have him as a lock because there's always the off chance that someone could be the last kind of last piece of the puzzle to make a big move to really improve the roster. And if he were to be the one that someone was looking for, I don't think Kevin Adams would say no just because it's Jordan Greenway, like it would be potentially, of course, with like a Dylan Cousins and whatnot, so on and so forth. Okay. The next guy on this list is Casey Middlestat. He is going into the last season of his 3-year, $7.5 million contract. It's only a $2.5 million hit. And I think that works into the favor of why the Sabres would want to keep him. He's an inexpensive asset on a contract year. It's kind of on a prove it situation. And he also finished the season very, very strong, of course, when Tage was out and he needed to kind of jump into that 1C position. And he did an incredible job. I thought he worked very, very well with Tuck and Skinner on his wings. It was kind of showing what his capabilities truly are. And just overall how much he's grown as a player, because I feel like in that position, say 2-3 seasons ago, if he was needed there, it would feel empty. It would feel like something's missing. I don't know if it was necessarily the physicality, of course, where a lot of people like to point at with him, but overall, I think there would be maybe something there that wasn't, seen before, that he clearly showed he has grown as an NHL player. The biggest point I want to make about Casey Middlestat is this is the first time in his career. I believe this even goes back to college ranks and everything of that nature. This is the first year in his career where he was actually able to go from start to finish and actually play an entire healthy season. And that's awesome. That's awesome for a guy like him. It's awesome for someone that really did need to develop and grow on his own and grow into his body at the pro level. And he was able to do that successfully and then even show in his development how far he has come. And I believe that that has worked out to his benefit. I will say this with Casey Middlestat. This is where I want to kind of leave it here. Probably by the trade deadline time, I would have put him, the likelihood of still being here at opening night would be like a 6 out of 10. I would say it's still likely, but there is definitely things that he could be used for to maybe improve the roster and give it a different look. And he could absolutely help a team elsewhere, whether it be Minnesota or whatnot. He's on the last year at a cheap deal and providing high skill on that low cost, so on and so forth. Of course, he has also played at Minnesota, University of Minnesota, but Minnesota is going to have to kind of get creative with those kinds of things. So there's going to be teams that could look for a guy like him and see what they get in that final stretch of that season where he had to step into the top center slot and everything like that. I think has boosted him up to an 8 out of 10. I think the likelihood of him being here on opening night is an 8 out of 10. I do still believe that Kevin Adams would entertain calls on him, or at least someone asking about him, just to see then what he could get for it. But his development's been great. I could definitely understand him still being here. I would be more than happy to see him here because he provides incredible center depth that teams strive to have, especially as young as it is, and is kind of growing as good as it is when it comes to Tage, Cousins, and Middlestat. That's a great top 3 centers, and they're all young and just hungry. So overall, I like the chances of him still being here, but I just don't think he's quite a lock, similar to Greenway. 8 out of 10 that he's most likely still here. Now, where it gets interesting are these next 2 forwards. It's the last 2 forwards in this category. It is the kids when it comes to JJ Paterka and Jack Quinn. Now, both of them are going on the second year of their 3-year entry level deals. Jack Quinn is a total of $5.325 million. JJ Paterka is actually only $2.775 million, just based on their draft position and everything like that. I believe I've lumped these guys together on purpose, and you constantly hear things from respected individuals and people that just understand how the business of the NHL works, and then, where this team is and where they want to be and so on and so forth. And the thing that's interesting is these are 2 guys that I definitely could see still being with the Sabres, and I would love to see it because I think the kids line when it comes to these 2 on the wings of Cousins was an amazing line to watch for a lot of this season, and I think that they have even more room to grow and whatnot. But when you have a great talent pool in your ranks, and then you have these assets that just got through one full NHL season that then could potentially be moved to bolster your roster, whether it's in the forward ranks or even defensemen if you wanted to, whatever it might be. And these guys have a valuable year at the NHL level that then could be moved somewhere else, that people truly appreciate that when it comes to a player. I think that's what makes it interesting when it comes to one of these two. I don't think both of these guys could be moved. I think that the reason I've bunched them together is one of these guys could. If it were me, and where I think the headspace of potentially Kevin Adams would be, is you'd be much more hard pressed to move Jack Quinn based on his skill, his ceiling, and everything like that than JJ Peterka. I feel like JJ Peterka, as great as he is and great as he can be, you have more guys like Yuri Kulich, or even if you wanted to get crazy and say Matt Savoy's ready to go, although, who knows where he slots in. He is technically a centerman, but if you wanted to start him out at wing in the NHL just to keep it easy for him, stuff like that. You have other skill guys that you could potentially bring up and in, and they earn that job, where it's like now it makes the expendability of JJ Peterka that much easier. And if then you could then move him for a top four defenseman somewhere that could add more physicality that I think this defensive core definitely could use, it's hard to not pull that trigger. So I want everyone to keep that in mind, why I don't have them as locks. Jack Quinn's the one to me that really teeters on that line. I think it would have to be a very, very, very over the top deal. And then it was just, they are pushing for Quinn and not Peterka. But I feel like Kevin Adams would keep kind of like shoving across the table Peterka instead of Quinn. It's like, hey, for this player X and a pick, we want, X, Y, and Quinn. And we're like, all right, we'll do X, Y, and Peterka. And it's like, oh, we want Quinn, and we'll give you Peterka, so on and so forth. So the likelihood of, let's start with Quinn. The likelihood of Quinn to still be on this opening day roster to me is also an 8 out of 10. I could even say 7.5 if I'm doing this in a ranking order correctly, but I'll just round it up to an 8 out of 10. And then JJ Peterka to me is a 7 to maybe 7.5. I'll just leave it at a flat 7, though. 7 out of 10 to still be on this roster. I can see a world where both of these guys are on the opening night roster come next season. I just do also believe that Kevin Adams is going to be trying to see what he can do to improve this roster. And when I get down to this end, I will just kind of do a very broad overview after this whole thing, of course, and kind of lay out where the lines stack currently and show you where my head's at here, because there are holes to be filled. And you don't necessarily just do that through cheap free agent deals and, promoting through the ranks if your goals are at least making the playoffs. Like, you need to do something then to fill those holes with a substantial move. Doesn't have to be crazy over the top, just substantial. Okay. Substantial. So JJ Peterka, 7 out of 10, Jack Quinn, 8 out of 10, Casey Middlestat, 8 out of 10, and Jordan Greenway, 9 out of 10, all likelihood to be on this opening night roster. I do believe it's more likely that they will be here. I just think that the door isn't exactly a lock for them to be on the opening night roster. We will move into defensemen real quick here. I think that these guys are all 6 to 7 out of 10s to likely be on the roster come opening night. I just don't think that they're locks and everything like that, but they're happy with what they have provided this organization, and it easily could be seen that they will still be here. Henry Yoki-Hairu, Ilya Lyubushkin, and Riley Stillman. These three individuals, to me, feel like guys who are still going to be here come the opening night. We already talked about Dahlin, Power, and Samuelson. What I will add to this, Riley Stillman, to me, is going to be a 7th defenseman. He will not be someone that they are looking at come opening night as part of the top 6. He, to me, looks like a guy who will most likely be someone that just is there if you need him, stuff like that, can rotate in, whatever it is. You want to change up a look for whatever reason. He's your 7th defenseman. He's kind of the Jacob Bryson coming into this year. Of course, Jacob Bryson will come up in a little bit here. But overall, he's not someone that I'm looking at or I think that they're looking at as well as a top 6 for sure. He is probably that 7th guy. And I do think they're going to try to do something with the defensive top 6 and probably more likely the top 4. But then you have Yoki Haru and Lyubushkin, who I do think still have a very good chance to be here opening night. So like I said, they are all about 6 to 7 out of 10's likelihoods to be on this roster. Nothing crazy with them contract wise or anything like that. That's kind of why it just feels right that they could still be here. And there's no reason to really move them as well. Two of them, Yoki Haru and Stillman, are on the last year of their current contracts, but they're not at crazy numbers either, where you are more enticed to move them because a team might want a rental, when it comes to those players. Anyways, that doesn't seem like the kind of guy you move in the offseason, but it could happen based on whatever's offered. Goalies, I have one in this category. Of course, there are two left to talk about that are currently under contract with the Sabres. Real quick, just to get it out of the way now that I just said that comment. Greg Anderson, I fully expect to retire. I mean, it doesn't shock anyone, so he's not coming up here. I'm not even going to bring him up with the Okposo and Gergensons thing. I hope he enjoys retirement. He absolutely deserves it. Incredible career, all of that stuff. The one goalie I have here to likely still be here surprises me a little bit, but it's UPL, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. He is on the last season of just his 2-year, $1.675 million contract. I believe, me personally, would have him more of a coin flip, like a 50-50, maybe 6 out of 10 likely to still be here on the opening day roster. But this is the player fully that when I listened to Granato and Kevin Adams' statements after the season ended in their press conferences and whatnot, I fully believe that they are comfortable at this moment in time going into next season with Levi and UPL being their 1-2. It really sounds like that. And I know a lot of fans may like that, and I don't hate it, to be quite clear. But if you're going to go into a season with Levi, especially being your 1, I would like to have something that's a little bit more reliable behind him. And I'll even air quote, if you're watching, you'll see it. But if not, if you're just listening, I'm air quoting, air quote, behind him. I would like a more veteran presence, someone that actually has good starting experience. UPL has been strong at times. I just think that his game is a little bit limited. And for as big as he is, I think he's a little slow at times and stuff like that. And it's just, he seems like more of a backup guy, which if you're all in on Levi, which I am, that's where I'm like, okay, you can win me over with this and I'll get it. And it's a cheap contract and it's a young guy that's still promising and everything like that. UPL, though, is someone that I genuinely believe that Kevin Adams wouldn't mind entertaining moving if possible and something like that. If the right guy, if they're targeting a goalie by any off chance, UPL is going to be more entertaining to other teams as well. That's why, I think they're happy if they're going to go into the season, or they're okay if they're going to go into the season with this, but I wouldn't call it UPL a lock. It's not like he's played his way into being a lock on this roster. Overall, I'd give him a 6 out of 10 likelihood to be on this roster come opening night. There's not much more to say there. I feel a little underwhelmed with UPL, but it sounds like Granato and Kevin Adams are okay with him, so he's likely to still be here. So just to recall all of that real quick, forwards, you have Greenway, Middlestat, Quinn, and Peterka most likely to still be here come opening night. Then you have Yoki Haru, Lyubushkin, and Stillman in the defenseman category, still likely to be here come opening night, and UPL wrapping up the goalies. Now, real quick, and to do I called it up in the air. When it comes to up in the air, the only reason it's called up in the air is because of one individual. And if you've been paying attention to this, I have talked about Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, Jeff Skinner, Dylan Cousins, Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, Matthias Samuelsson, Jack Quinn, JJ Peterka, Jordan Greenway, Casey Middlestat, Henry Yoki Haru, Ilya Lyubushkin, Riley Stillman. I've talked about all these skaters. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about a goalie at this point. Well, I will, but that's not the one that I'm going to highlight here. There has been one individual that I haven't brought up that I do believe is kind of an up in the air candidate for this. I think it's an interesting discussion to be had, and I will get into that in a second. I will get out the formalities first. The easiest candidate to not be on the roster, even though they are currently under contract with these Buffalo Sabres come opening night next season, is Victor Olofsson. Look, I love Victor Olofsson when it comes to who he is as a player individually. I own his jersey. I actually liked the number 68 more than 71. I respect the number change, was a little salty about it, but I still like him as a player somewhat. It's just frustrating at times with how this team likes to play, what he provides or what he doesn't provide this team, and what you could potentially do with that spot that he is currently slotted in, and how it could make this team so much better a lot of the time. So 1 year left, 4.75 million for basically a specialist like player. I do think there were times where he actually did kind of have a little bit more of a well-rounded game, but it was in flashes. It was never consistent, anything like that. I think it's generally agreed upon that the Sabres should probably move on from him. And I do think there are going to be other teams out there that are going to want a guy of his skill set. And it is very, very good. Of course, that shot, especially on the power play, is lethal. It's incredible. A lot of teams would drool at the opportunity to have someone like that on the right side of a power play unit. So it's pretty easy to see, him just being moved on for something else to fill that roster spot. The value in moving him is just as equal of, getting someone else in his slot than anything else. I wrote it down. The likelihood of being moved this offseason, 9 out of 10. Nothing is guaranteed. So let's just put him at the closest thing to it. I think 9 out of 10. Olofsson most likely will be moved. I would be pretty shocked if he is still on this roster come opening night. Another guy that I would honestly be pretty shocked at if he is here come opening night is defenseman Jacob Bryson. Um, Look, he's got 1 year left, if I believe right now. I'm double checking this. Yeah, 1 year left at $1.85 million. It was a 2 year, $3.7 million contract. I He's a liability. Like, he is fast, he can move, but even when Granado would make the move, when I felt like it was because he wanted to put a little bit more speed on the ice with that third line combination, he's too much of a liability in the defensive zone, which having one of your defensemen as a liability is not good. And overall, I just don't see Bryson fitting this team at all. And unfortunately for him, he's just an odd man out, and they could utilize his spot, like I said, with Stillman, and to me, get better production anyways. So, likelihood to be not on the opening day roster. I don't necessarily say moved. I just don't know what you do with him. I don't know if you just flat out cut him, if you trade him, whatever it is. But to just not be on the roster come opening night is another 9 out of 10 for me. Thirdly on this list is goaltender Eric Comrie. Look, there is value to him. You would hear it in a lot of comments with Kevin Adams and Granado and stuff, that he was the one goalie who wouldn't come off the ice if someone requested a goalie to stay back to do a little bit of extra work on the ice or whatnot. He would always stay back. He's kind of a locker room guy. He's someone that everyone respects in there and stuff like that, as a consummate pro. And he seems like a great backup. I mean, when Levi was doing his thing, Eric Comrie was the backup a lot, not Levi. I feel like that does have a little bit of saying in there. I think there's some weight to that. I don't know if necessarily they want him out of the organization. I just think that they would, doing a 3 goaltender rotation to me, and just having 3 goalies, having the backups, we'll call them the plural backups, share the net in practice is not good. You're going to hand the net to Levi. So to keep the confidence high of UPL, if you're trying to keep it there, you let him have his own net on the other side of the ice in practice. Let him feel like he's the true guy in the backup. So then what you do with Comrie is you suscept him to waivers and send him down to Rochester. I don't know if anyone would pick him up. That's kind of where I would be at with him. If someone did, good for him. Wish him all the best. That's fine. But overall, I just don't see him as an opening night roster guy. I don't see him being valuable enough for that. So I give him likelihood to not be on the roster come opening night, 6 out of 10. So that means 4 out of 10 to be on the roster. I could see it. They did show last season that they were comfortable having 3 goaltenders. I just think now you have Levi, who is kind of this guy you are really leaning on. He is going to be your guy going forward for a long time coming. That's already one net secured in practice, even. It's like you don't want to be splitting the other net with 2 guys and making them unhappy. We've heard stories from other people in the organizations, whether it's Peters or even Marty Baron himself, the era where it was Mika Norinen, Baron, and Miller. They had 3 guys in practice. Mika Norinen hated it. It just killed him, and they eventually had to move him because it just how much of a detriment he was. And luckily for the Sabres, that worked out in the end because Ryan Miller was a beast. So Eric Comrie, I feel like he's more likely not to be on the roster come opening night than he is. Last but not least is kind of the guy I cliff hung there a little bit. Peyton Krebs. Look, I think Peyton Krebs is valuable to this team. I think he is a solid player and had grown a lot in a certain role, especially being on a line with Gergensons and Okposo. I think he learned a lot about being a pro off the ice as much as he did on the ice. He gained a toughness on the ice that is valuable and stuff like that. We saw him get into scrums all the time. I just don't believe that's really the best suit for his game. For one, if he wants to be that guy, he can be that guy. I just like, and it's awesome. Like, I don't disrespect anything about Peyton Krebs's game and what he's shown us. It's just at the same time, he's not any sort of massive impact. If you pulled Peyton Krebs off of this lineup and just put in generic fourth line center slash winger, I feel like you'd get the exact same thing. And Peyton Krebs is young enough. He has 1 year left at the $1.337 million that he's currently making. And it just feels like he's an asset you could potentially use moving elsewhere to improve the roster. So I think the value in him as an asset is more so than what he is as a player per se. And just for that reason alone, in an offseason where Kevin Adams is going to try to make improvements to this roster because playoffs, again, for another billionth time, is the expectation and goal of this upcoming season. He is someone that I feel like is truly up in the air. And he is the reason that this category was up in the air in the first place, because it would be like destined to leave, in my opinion. But Krebs, to me, is that 50-50. He is a true 50-50. He is not even very likely to still be here in the lineups. When I get to that after talking about Okposo and Gergensons here, I do have him written in because I will not believe that he's moved until I see it. Overall, though, if I were to be sitting in Kevin Adams' shoes and I'm trying to improve this roster, he is a piece that I feel like I could utilize to get something different to this roster that would make him better in the end. So therefore, I have him as a true 5 out of 10, 50-50 coin flip on if he will be here come next season on opening night. Okay, real quick. I want to talk about Kyle Okposo and Zemgus Girgensons. They are both currently free agents. Zemgus Girgensons feels like I want to say complicated, but it's not like complicated in the sense of anything bad or like there's a lot of different variables moving on. I just don't know where it truly stands. I can't get a good read on if they want him back, or I believe he does want to come back. I think he's open to it. I think he has been with the Sabres so long that he wants to kind of see this through finally. There's something with that I believe, based on his social media, based on his comments, everything like that. It seems like he would be very, very open to staying. I just don't know where Kevin Adams and Granato and all of them see him. So I don't feel like it's in the same spot as Okposo, of course, but overall, I'll give it a return chance of a true 50-50 coin flip, only in the sense of I just really don't know. So I'm not going to put it any less anyways. Kyle Okposo is kind of more of a clear-cut case to me. To me and to everyone, honestly, he's either retiring or he's coming back on a team-friendly deal, probably a 1-year deal at that as well. And his value is clear as day. He is the captain of this team, or was the captain of this team because he's technically a free agent, but he is still the captain of this team until another captain is named, in my opinion. And ultimately, I feel like if he wanted a place behind the bench or is just like a player scout or wanted an upper management, like basically an excuse to get him in the building still, they would offer him that. And if he ultimately wants to come back and play because he has showed he can still be somewhat productive even this past season, um, I feel like they would welcome him back with open arms. I think the decision is entirely up to Okposo. I think everyone thinks the decision is entirely up to him. It's just you have to respect his ways. He, of course, has the head injuries that were plaguing him a little bit a few years ago and stuff like that. A lot to work through. Those are very scary times. I mean, there was times where he was worried about things a lot bigger than hockey. But overall, the decision's up to him. I didn't even give a number on return chances because I'm going to just say I respect his decision either way. And it's, of course, entirely up to him. So I hope that he does whatever he feels is best for him and his family, regardless if it's play or not. And I respect if he does want to come back and play. I know some people may not want him to just because of fact of you would love to see his slot used elsewhere. But to me, with how much this locker room respects him, with how much the coaching staff respects him, and then how much Kevin Adams respects him, things like that. There are so many it's invaluable. Like he is so important to this locker room, top to bottom, and organization, top to bottom, that I fully respect if he came back on a 1 year, $1.25 million deal or whatever. Okay with me, perfectly fine. Like that is cool with me, and he can happily take some fourth line and be there on the bench for the boys, be there in the locker room for the guys, and help them hopefully take another step forward next season. So overall, now we got to we're wrapping up here a little bit, but I said before, I want to kind of give now a general breakdown of kind of where this leaves everything with the roster. So your first line is of course Skinner, Thompson, Tuck. That's locked in. Those are all locks, as I talked about. Those guys are here to stay. The second line I currently have as the kids line, Peterka, Cousins, Quinn. That wouldn't be a surprise to me, wouldn't be a surprise to anyone, I believe. Cousins, of course, I did label as that fourth lock. Quinn to me is the closest thing to a lock without being a lock. And then Peterka to me still feels very solid, but also I did put a question mark in parentheses next to him just in case something were to be there. And this is not necessarily with him being moved as well. If you are able to say move Olofsson and something else for a top six forward, Peterka sliding down to your third line would be sweet. That is awesome. So just keep that in mind. But as of right now, because I don't know what is out there and I'm not talking about that quite yet, and that's the whole point of this exercise too. In the coming weeks and the coming episodes, I will go into then what the free agency market looks like, what the trade market looks like, and everything like that, and how this team could really look to bolster itself when it comes to this offseason to give it a much more solid feel from top to bottom where they can make that playoff run and everything like that. So Peterka, Cousins, Quinn is the second line. The third line at this point in time, because of everything I just said, question mark on the left wing, Middlestat at center, question mark at the right wing. I genuinely believe that those holes could be filled in a facet of ways, whether it's promotions from, Rochester, promotions from the ranks of juniors, whatever it is within the organization, or via trade / free agency. I think those holes can be filled with the best available kind of deal. Yuri Kulich is a guy I am just circling, and I will talk about more in the whatever episode I decide to discuss forwards and everything like that. But as of this point now, that is only four. That is now 7 forwards filling 9 slots here. And then fourth line, even though I brought up Krebs as up in the air, I have him still penciled in at center currently, centering Greenway on the left and a question mark on the right. That question mark on the right is, of course, potentially Okposo. That's if he wants to come back. Like I said, I wasn't going to speculate. I wasn't going to do anything like that because I just don't have any information myself. I'm not feeling comfortable to just be like, yeah, he's absolutely going to be back. That's his spot if he wants it, but I'm going to leave it as a question mark for now. So in total on your forwards, you have a total of 12 forward slots, and they have currently 3 holes in there, with maybe a fourth if you move Peterka. So a lot can be had there. There could be promotion from Rochester. I do think Yuri Kulich or even Lucas Rusek. I mean, that's another guy that could absolutely be making the roster come day one next season. I thought he had a couple strong performances when he had been called up and was asked to play some NHL time up here for the Sabres. Sorry about that. Needed a drink of water. Throat's getting dry. He's another guy to look at for a possible promotion. Matt Savoy, I brought up earlier. Matt Savoy is a guy that just burnt up the junior ranks, man. It's like I can't wait to watch him in dev camp and preseason and stuff. If he looks like what he is there, I think he's potentially already NHL ready. He looks incredible. And then, of course, there are trades or free agents out there, and I will happily talk about all of that coming up in a future episode. Looking at the defenseman real quick, I currently have it at Darlene Samuelson as your top pairing, Power Yoki Haru as your second pairing, question mark on the left with Lubushkin on the right, and Stillman as your seventh D. Now, I'm not saying that the Sabres will necessarily be looking for, say, just a borderline rosterable defenseman there. I think, you know, they could go many different directions with that. I personally would like to see them try to make a move to fill a little more toughness in that top four. I think I look at Power Yoki Haru, and to me, I would like a little bit more physicality there. And we will see what they can do. That, like, you're watching Radko Gudas right now for Florida just absolutely be a menace in that Boston series and now the Toronto Florida series. Oh man, I just drool at the opportunity of having a guy like him on the roster. Like, that would be so, so sweet because Samuelson provides a great toughness, I believe, and Darling in his own right. Like, Darling can handle himself, but that top pairing has them. And then it's like after that, like Labushkin at full health could lay a big hit or two. But even then, like, you would think that his physicality leaves you lacking a little bit. And just could use someone like kind of ramp up the physicality a little bit of and the stay at homeness, we'll call it as well when it comes to the defensive pairings. So, and then goaltenders, no surprise there. Levi, UPL is the backup, is what I currently have it penciled in right now. So that's your lineup. Um, Overall, there's holes to be filled, and there's plenty to be talking about regarding those holes coming up in future Sabres Chat episodes. And I can't wait to get into those because I love just talking free agents, trades, and things like that. Like, guys I would love to target if I were Kevin Adams and the Sabres. But I would still, I do feel confident in looking at that lineup and being like, as long as things go smoothly, that can be a lineup that you can run it back with and get good hockey out of, and they should find success. So I'm excited to talk about, what could be had out there. But overall, I think this roster is in a good spot. Please don't come at me too hard about the Peyton Krebs thing. It's not about him. It's about what you could maybe get for him and or the slot on the roster. Maybe just add some more physicality or just traditional big toughness at that fourth line center while still having scoring depth there as well. You really got to be three lines deep of scoring, and then your fourth line needs to be productive with its minutes. Not saying that he can't be. I just think maybe he leaves you wanting more at times, and he's still young and looked at as a valuable piece potentially to other teams. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It felt good to be back. I'll be honest. I apologize for being off the past few weeks, but it just didn't feel right, especially with all the Bill stuff going on. But I'm glad to be back. I look forward to talking more off season with you guys, talking draft. The draft lottery is coming up, by the way. I believe it is in 5 days from recording this now. So 4 days or less from when you are listening to this. Can't wait to see who wins the Connor Bedard lottery. My money currently is on Chicago. I just think Chicago. Look, I'm not going to say they rig it, but I'm just hoping. I will say this: I'm hoping at Chicago. I would love to see Chicago come back up as a market. It was exciting to see them in their heyday, of course, with the Taves and Kane and others. No disrespect to, of course, Seabrook and everyone else around there. I don't know why Seabrook was the first one that came to mind, but regardless, Chicago is who I have my money on. It would just also be funny that Columbus was in a great position to be that best odds, and then Johnny Gaudreau himself sniped the Penguins in overtime and killed about 5% of their chances with that one single shot. It's very funny to me, but that's coming up. Talk about draft. We're going to talk about free agents and trades. Of course, I will happily do that as well. We'll break down the positions and where maybe we could fill those holes, where they will come from, whether it's promotions from the organization itself or via those trades and free agent acquisitions. So I am Luka. This is Sabres Chat presented by Built in Buffalo. It's an absolute pleasure to be back here on air with all of you. And I look forward to the future episodes in this offseason because next thing you know it, this season will be right around the corner. We'll be in preseason hockey time. The playoffs will feel like a distant memory. We'll have our Stanley Cup champion being, raising a banner in a couple of weeks. And we're right back at it with Sabres hockey. So it's an absolute pleasure. You guys all have a great rest of your day and or evening, and I will see you on episode 12 next time. Have a great one.